There's a car in my junkyard and it's not quite right. I own a scrapyard. Have for a while. I live in a small town quite a ways away from any large cities, and as such, there aren't many people who are employed at this yard. It's just me during weekdays and a security guard who watches over it at night when I'm not there. The primary scrap we take in is vehicles. Mostly people's beaters and failed project cars. Occasionally old farm equipment, and sometimes a school bus or two. We provide a small cash sum to the owner, and I'll get to work on taking the cars apart and salvaging whatever still works to sell as used parts. It's a job that pays okay, but I love working on vehicles and it's rewarding to work for yourself. But I must admit, I've had a few head scratchers in my time working here. I originally didn't want to tell anyone about what I found a week ago. I truly just wanted to forget about it. At the same time, my curiosity is too strong. I need to know if anyone else has ever come across something like this. I went into work one morning, and I began to take inventory on the vehicles we had in our lot. I do this occasionally to make sure nobody vandalized anything or tried salvaging their own parts. And for the most part, everything was as I had left it the night before. Everything, save for this car tucked away in the corner behind our scrap metal shed. The night before, there were exactly 6 vehicles in my lot. In the morning, there were 7. The security guard on night shift isn't supposed to allow anyone to deliver a vehicle. He doesn't know how to register it in our system, and he certainly doesn't have access to the cash safe. Was it possible that they let the deliverer drive their vehicle in to negotiate prices with me in the morning? Well, maybe, but there were no notes left on my desk about the car. There was no contact information, or even an acknowledgement about the vehicle. And it didn't stop there. The car was tucked behind the scrap shed, which seems like a very odd place to leave it if it was supposed to be seen by me. Further, and I'll admit this was when things started getting a little weird, there were no tire tracks to the vehicle. The only thing that would explain how it got there was a small hole in the side of the fence, a hole that wasn't there last night. Yet, the hole was small. Not even a person could fit through it. Well, I didn't really think much of it. It was strange, but work was work. And if I was given the opportunity to salvage a car for free, I'd see no reason not to take the profit. If the vehicle owner showed up later, then great. I'd willingly strike a deal. Only, as the day went by, nobody stopped by. So by around 4, I assumed the vehicle was abandoned, hopped in my truck, and towed it to the center of the lot. Now, it's probably worth mentioning what the car looked like. Because, well, once I got it where I wanted it, I took a look to see what I was working with. Right off the bat, the car looked at first glance like an old 1970s Ford Mustang. But there were no insignias on the grille. Further, it looked too long to be a Mustang, and the proportions were just wrong. I'm a bit shorter than the average man, but when I peeked inside the cabin, it was incredibly cramped, and I knew that even I would struggle to fit in it. The floor was raised far too much off the ground. Then there were the tires. Each tire was a different size and different brand. And the axles were misaligned, but in a way that the balance of the car was not impacted. To make matters worse, the actual frame of the car was off. It was painted a dark purple, but the paint almost seemed to blend into a maroon the further back it went. And, honestly, quite the weirdest part was that the roof of the car had mold growing on it. Not the ceiling. The metal roof. There were blemishes and scratches on the car, but none of it looked as it should if the car was painted the color it was. There were parts on the chassis that were rusting, but it wasn't turning red from oxidation. It was turning black. Then, when I went to the back, the tail lights were not the same either. One was larger than the other, and the one on the right was circular, whereas the one on the left was rectangular. The headlights were weird too. There were 2 sets of headlights on the left side, and 1 set on the right. So while looking at its exterior, I decided that what I was most likely working with was a failed project car that was abandoned, and perhaps the owner dropped it off at night out of embarrassment. Still, the chassis was all wrong. I don't know where one could get a car so out of proportion like this. Further, While the overall craftsmanship was high quality, everything fit together, and overall the vehicle looked structurally sound, there were just too much weirdness to be explained as the passion project of one person, unless it was their intent to make something different. But everything I told you wasn't even the worst of it. No. The worst of it was that the car smelled horribly. It smelled like rotting flesh, which began to produce a new theory in my mind. This weird car might have been used as a dumping object for a body. The trunk was locked, so I decided to see if I could locate the keys. I opened the driver's side door, which was unsurprisingly unlocked, and saw that the keys were in the ignition. I ducked into the cramped driver's side of the vehicle, arching my back as I tried to sit in it comfortably. The moment I made contact with the driver's seat, I winced. I sunk into the fabric. The driver's seat was made of something far softer than I expected, and it was wet. I don't mean like water was spilled or the rain got in. No. The driver's seat was moist in a disgusting, uncomfortable, sticky kind of way. It felt like I was sitting on a tongue. The steering wheel was also immobile. At this point, I was starting to get weirded out. However, I was already inside this weird vehicle, and I wanted to know if the damn thing at least started. I put my hand on the key and turned it. At first, there was nothing. Then, I could hear a sound coming from the front of the vehicle. It sounded like something thumping, something rhythmic. There was air coming out of the AC vents, but it too was rhythmic and cold and moist. Weirdest yet, the radio turned on. The music coming from it sounded unlike any radio station I've ever listened to. It was playing some sort of music, and it was very light, almost inaudible. The volume control didn't seem to do anything. And the music, it's just some weird guitar playing random, non-harmonic notes with a complete disregard for tempo. I'll just post a link here if you want to check it out. That was that. I decided I was done with the cab, and just wanted to find the source of the rotting smell. To be honest, I didn't even care to scrap this thing anymore. It was too weird for me, and I didn't even think anything could be salvaged. I left the car running to see if it might die and unlocked the trunk. So I let the car continue to run, hopped out of the moist and slimy seat, and made my way to the trunk. The stench grew stronger. I was almost certain that there must have been something dead inside the back, but when I opened it, I found nothing. In fact, there was no trunk. The trunk access just opened up to a part of the vehicle's casing. The trunk door had absolutely no purpose. But there was something odd about the hinges. They appeared to be, I'm not sure how to explain it, but almost like spider webs. They were certainly not made of no metal, and they didn't look like any sort of regular trunk hinge. That gave me one last idea, and honestly, I didn't know quite what to expect. I could hear the thumping of the car's engine, and I figured the last course of action to take was to visually inspect it. Then, if my suspicions were correct and there truly wasn't anything of value, I'd call a tow truck to have this thing brought to a landfill and buried so it could be long forgotten. I went back to the cab, found the hood release lever, and pulled it. The thumping got louder. It was at this point that I truly thought about what I was hearing. The thumping was rhythmic. Thump. Pause. Thump thump. Pause. Thump thump. Pause. Thump. Pause. This didn't sound like no car engine. I closed the driver's door and began making my way towards the front of the vehicle. I placed my hand in the hood, wincing as the roof of the hood felt sticky. I released the hood, flinging it open, and I was met with, well, I don't really know. The first thing I noticed was the heart. Thump thump. Pause. Thump. Pause. I stood awestruck. My mouth was agape. I didn't even notice that this vehicle had no engine, no radiator, no battery. There was a large heart in the center of a clumpy piece of mass. I looked over to where I thought a battery might be, and instead saw what looked like a disfigured brain. The compressor was replaced with lungs, and I watched as they filled and released. Thump thump. Pause. There were no pipes, Everything was connected in disgusting-looking organic tubes. I would say they were arteries, but I'm not entirely sure that the heart was pumping blood. A black ooze was dripping from one of the clumps of tissue and was spilling over the thick rib cage that kept everything in place. Everything under this car's hood was organic, and I may not know much about human biology, but I can say with confidence that none of the things I saw belonged to a human. I doubt any of it belonged to an animal. I didn't scream. I didn't even make a sound. A million thoughts ran through my head. After a minute of helpless staring, I settled on the easiest course of action. I slammed the hood, turned the vehicle off, and closed up shop for the day. I didn't know what to think. I've never seen anything like it. I didn't bring this up to anyone. I honestly don't know who else to tell. My wife would freak. The local police wouldn't believe me, and what could they do anyways? The next day, the vehicle was missing, but I didn't really give a damn. A night guard told me he didn't see anything about no weird vehicle. Fine by me. I honestly kinda just wanted to forget about it. Perhaps everything I saw was just a bad dream. Or a hallucination. Those explanations hardly make any sense. Unfortunately, the hole in my fence is real. And the tire tracks from me towing are also real. There was something unnatural in my junkyard that day. The more I think about this encounter, the more uneasy I get. This may be crazy, but I'm actually starting to wonder if the damn thing was actually alive. The details just don't make sense. The radio and its weird imitation of music. The nonsensical engineering of the chassis. The, abundant living tissue. What I came across wasn't no damn car. It was something pretending to be a car.